Lots of these media companies have been very slow, for example, to pick up on terrorist groups setting up Twitter accounts and social media accounts to export their views. So what is going on here, do you think?
Certainly, I think this is something that has, people have expressed concern about in the past, particularly with the decision by a number of social media platforms to, as one example, throw the former president of the United States off of their platforms. And that was something that really brought to the public attention the fact that these social media companies that have essentially become the public square have an awful lot of power over the sorts of information that we can access, the sorts of information that we can consume. Obviously, there's no way really of knowing whether or not Facebook are being honest when they say that this was an honest mistake. But I think regardless of whether this was a mistake or not, it's something that should not have happened in the first place. This mother, who's obviously been horribly bereaved, was posting on Facebook about the fact that she blames President Biden for her son's death, which I think is an absolutely reasonable thing for her to be posting about in her grief. And obviously, Instagram is also owned by the same company as Facebook. And so as a result of that, she said that she had a number of her posts were being flagged up, former posts from a long time previously. And she was getting notifications saying that her account would be disabled. And then obviously it was. And obviously, because this is something that has received public attention, now Facebook have issued this sort of apology explaining why this was a mistake. But I think it just goes to show that actually these companies do have an awful lot of control over the sorts of information that we're allowed to see. And this mother felt that it was something that had happened because she'd been critical of President Biden, and she felt that this was a political move on the company's part.
Emma, Emma, is it, just so we know and our viewers know, is it a sort of algorithm that is deciding what's banned, what isn't allowed to be posted, or is it actually moderators, actually humans making these decisions? I think often members of the public aren't quite clear what's going on here.
Yeah, I think social media companies use a mix of those two things. They do certainly use algorithms to treat information in different ways. So there's something called friction where, for example, you'll see on a post, it might come up sort of censoring the content or giving you a warning about the content or redirecting you, for example, to official information about COVID if they feel that the post is misinformation. There are a number of different ways that companies can do this, including algorithms as well as actual people moderating posts. But obviously it's not possible for these companies to moderate all posts with individuals. Presumably in some kind of appeals process, these things actually do get to sort of be seen by human eyes. But I imagine in the first instance, it's something that is done by algorithms or done as a result of people flagging up posts. That's another way that mobs sometimes swarm posts and get them deleted or get accounts disabled.
Do you think that Facebook will continue to come under more scrutiny, more questions? Because this mum was a Trump supporter. We know America is meant to be the land of the free. We know that Trump was removed and it was very much a welcoming of Biden. And many people will say it's, you can have free speech if you're of the left and if you're of Biden, but you couldn't if you were of the right. They've always had the issue about whether they were a publisher or a platform. But do you think now people will say, Facebook, we need to understand what your rationale is for removing people, because we see now a clear division between who you as an organisation wanted as a leader, and maybe that's why Biden never came under the scrutiny he should have as he was on his role and path to become president.
Exactly. I think that, as I said before, because this has really essentially become the public square, particularly during coronavirus, where everybody's lives essentially went online, people do want transparency from these companies about how they are potentially altering the way that we consume information and what we are allowed to see. And I think that with the instance of President Trump was obviously a very large public case of online censorship. And then obviously there were tens of thousands of accounts that were also purged after the Capitol Hill riot as well. So lots of people who were thrown off of that platform, who then tried to go onto the alternative platform, Parler, which, as you say, because it's a private company, often the argument is, well, there can always be an alternative private company. But actually the alternative Parler was then thrown off of the App Store by Google and Apple, and also Amazon, which hosted the website, essentially shut it down entirely, which has led to a series of lawsuits as well. So I think people want transparency about this, and particularly over the last 18 months, the acknowledgement of the extreme influence and power that these companies have over the information that we consume. People want to know, in what ways they are potentially being influenced by the biases of these companies.
How about Piers Morgan? Shall we move to Piers and what happened in the UK? It seems we're more for free speech than America and the land of the free. So do you want to fill us in on that and why it was ruled that it was fair what he did?
So after the Oprah Winfrey interview with Meghan Markle, Piers had essentially questioned them, said that he disbelieved what Meghan was saying, said he wouldn't even believe her if she was reading out the weather report. And then this whole hoo-ha occurred where Piers stormed off. The chief executive and executives of ITV then told Piers that he either had to apologise or leave. He chose to leave. And Ofcom, having received a record number of complaints, then investigated ITV over what had occurred. Ofcom have now cleared Piers and ITV, which has been welcomed as a huge victory for free speech. They said that he was entirely within his rights as a journalist and as a broadcaster to disbelieve the views expressed by a public figure, in this case, Meghan and Harry. So this is a victory also for free speech and also of journalism. And as Piers has pointed out, as others have as well, that free speech and journalistic freedom are a pillar of our democracy. And so this really is a huge victory. However, I think that we shouldn't be too naive in saying that Ofcom should be recognised as a defender of free speech, because actually Ofcom have in many cases contributed to the chilling effect that they themselves talk about. They said that this, if this hadn't have been allowed to go ahead, that it would have been a chilling effect on his free speech and also the free speech of the audience as well.
Thank you, Emma. Can I just ask you one thing? I presume that you do recognise that with free speech comes responsibility. And of course, often what we're talking about in terms of these social media platforms is how terrorists, people like the guy that killed the people down in Plymouth the other week are on these incel platforms, conspiracy theorists, misogyny, hate. Do you agree that with free speech comes some responsibility, and actually it cannot be that we can allow just full reign for those sort of views across our social media?
Well, my position would be that any speech that is legal should be allowed on all platforms. And this is a concern that has been raised in relation to the online harms bill that is currently being discussed, which is the idea, and also pressure coming from organisations as well, to censor material that it is regarded as legal but harmful. And harmful is often understood as being simply offensive. Of course, illegal content that actually incites violence, for example, is in a different league to things that might just solely be offensive. And this is a point that Ofcom have made in relation to the discussion around Piers, which is that in this context, he was rigorously challenged on his views. And that's the whole purpose of free speech, that everybody should be entitled to their opinion, whether you like it or not. And you should have the ability to rigorously challenge those views as well, rather than to drive those views underground and to ban them from the public discussion.
Can I just put this one point too, because I thought it was an interesting point by Roger Mosley, who was the previous head of news on TV News BBC. And he also wanted to sort of question the differential, though, of opinions to facts and news. So you couldn't have people putting facts, opinions as facts. So he did draw a distinction maybe between Piers and maybe what Emily Maitlis was doing as a news reporter on Dominic Cummings. Can you see the difference there? Because I would like to make sure myself, I believe in free speech and I believe in opinions, but you can't have opinions pretending to be facts and news.
Yeah, I think Ofcom actually did take, and it was part of their assessment, was they took into account the context of the show and the expectations of the audience as well. Piers is really, in some people's regard, I would say, a king of comment journalism. And so you fully expect Piers to be expressing robust and potentially offensive opinions. And I think it's important that all journalists, and this is something that is really, really important in the case of Piers and what happened with ITV here, is that it's extremely important that journalists and members of the public are able to say if they do not believe that something is true. No one should ever be forced to say that something is true if they do not feel that it is. And the fact that ITV essentially asked him to apologise or leave, really, Ofcom should have fallen short in the sense that I think they should have actually reprimanded ITV for infringing on his freedom to do that.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for taking us through some of the ins and outs of this debate on free speech.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.